copies of it up by the lobby. You can buy them if you want. You can't buy this one because I already signed it. I'm giving it to Andrea after the show. A little over 2 years ago, I made the mistake of calling my sister for her birthday. Instead of sending a quick text from a burner phone. For years I said on stage, my sister is gay, I love her like a brother. It's a lie. I don't like her. She's mean. I was in a dark place just then, on the phone, depressed, isolated, desperate for human contact, kindness, empathy, and insight. When I become depressed, my judgment can become impaired. I made my second mistake. I showed vulnerability in front of a member of my family. I told my sister that I had been feeling isolated, that it felt as though I had alienated everyone I had ever known or loved. I asked her if she knew why she had seemed to dislike me so much when we were children. If I am being brutally honest, I was hoping that if she remembered what a dick she was to me as a child, she might be able to see through a long enough lens to gain perspective and adjust her behavior toward me in the present. She said, well, I saw you at one of those nightclubs when you were still in New York, and you did a joke where you used the phrase hostile lesbian. It was really offensive. I don't remember the joke, but it was a word package. You said it like you'd said it 100 times. Hostile lesbian. I said, okay. I didn't think that a joke I'd written in my 20s could possibly have made her a preemptive dick to me when we were kids. But I let her have this. It was her birthday call. I let her run the conversation. She went on. You think any woman who isn't available to you is hostile. That's what I think. Because I said hostile lesbian in a joke in 1984? You want to engage with me? This is what it looks like. I said, I went to Sarah Lawrence. I've dealt with a lot of different kinds of lesbians. Do you even hear yourself? A lot of different kinds of lesbians? What if that was Jews? What if I said, I've dealt with a lot of different kind of Jews? She had slipped into her most superior tone, unassailably positioned as a Jewish lesbian, persecuted on all fronts and thus better informed and morally attuned than I, a cisgender male, could ever be. I said, I'm not sure what we're discussing at this point. I live in Hollywood. I have dealt with a lot of different kinds of Jews. Jesus, that's just gross now. That's not even funny, you know? Why do you have to deal with people? Why can't you just go somewhere and join a community and be a part of it? I have a group of friends. I hang at the edge and observe. I think they get me. That's not being part of a community. Are you sure you're not on the spectrum? Well, it's good talking to you. Have a great rest of your birthday. Hey, yeah, thanks for calling. I went downstairs and asked my wife if she remembered a joke of mine that I might still have been doing when we met 30 years ago that had the phrase hostile lesbian in it. She said, oh, honey, did you call your sister? I nodded. Then I said, she thinks I might be on the spectrum. My wife said, oh, that makes sense. She teaches second grade. She deals with a lot of different kinds of autists. When we were kids, my sister and I, autism wasn't a spectrum. Autism referred to the flappy, headbangy kids who got sort of lumped in with the physically disabled who had difficulty communicating, the emotionally disabled who resisted learning, the intellectually disabled, and so on. Kids were normal or they were broken. Some of the normal kids were weird. I was normal weird. Reading during lunch. Enjoying the subject matter in class. Making casual conversation with my teachers about the curriculum during recess. In the break room. With the coffee maker and the cigarette smoke. I took questions about autism to my office and dove into a hyper-focused research spiral. I almost immediately learned that one data point for autism is a tendency to dive into a hyper-focused research spiral. I clicked links and read articles. I ticked boxes. I ticked a lot of boxes. I talked to my therapist. Elements of my experience on planet Earth that had never made sense began snapping into focus. Anger outbursts. I'm going to start that sentence again because it had way too many S's in it that first time. Anger outbursts that I had attributed to some childhood trauma or hidden rage had occupied me often in therapy, had troubled me deeply. Now it seemed they were just neurological responses to certain kinds of overload. They could be dispelled with some simple stimming exercises. Admirers and colleagues spoke of my skill and talent. I worked hard. I could only attribute my lack of professional success in the mainstream entertainment industry to my clearly objectionable personality. No matter what I do, it seems very few people like me very much. I have gone out of my way to do the things that charming and popular people do. I make eye contact as close to 30% of the time as I can manage. I count. I strive to be generous with my time, support, and laughter for other people's efforts. As a child, I learned that confident people stood a certain way, shoulders back, weight centered, and so on, so I adopted that posture. I add, I could be wrong, but to the beginning of sentences to seem less arrogant even when absolutely sure of my facts. Now, observing these behaviors as autistic masking traits, I could more clearly assess how I might be perceived. With the possibility of autism as a lens through which to view my irresistible punchability as a child, thank you, my non-athletic relationship to my body, and a dozen other great questions of my psyche, I began to find a kind of grace for myself. Things I had been desperately trying to fix through psychological exploration might be neurological in nature. I called my insurer for a proper diagnosis. In a 3-hour interview, a neuropsychologist asked questions and held a clipboard. He ticked boxes. He ticked a lot of boxes. My autism comes in a constellation of affects which, when traced, draws a pattern across the sky. A picture of me punching the side of an ice cream truck, shouting, "Stop it with the bells, goddammit!" What do you want to do, draw laughing children? This diagnosis gave me a new box of tools to work with as I parsed out the psychological from the neurological, the psychic wound from the synaptic wiring. More importantly, perhaps, it gave me new insight into my mother, allowing me to find a kind of peace with her in the last 2 years before she died suddenly on my 60th birthday a week and a half ago, turning a planned celebration into a Delmore Schwartz fever dream of airport elevators that opened onto hospital corridors. When my mother died, as my mother died, my sister took pot shots with me. She told me that the awards my films have won sound scammy to her. She told me that her novel would probably never be published because of the political climate and that she had no interest in my advice on niche publishers. I should stop trying to pretend to be an expert in things. She behaved dismissively toward me, spoke disparagingly, delivered emotional body blows for a full day before I found myself standing outside the hospital, punching myself in the head for hoping we might have a relationship. My sister also confessed in that hospital room, while my mother gurgled her last and my father sat holding her hand, to a decision she had made that left her anguished. She sought absolution, or at least an audience to hear her out, and my father and I gave her that. The choice she made that tormented her hung on the slow breath air of that room, and I knew it broke her shield of sanctimony, her self-righteous certainty. I knew I could destroy every argument she had ever made about my sins as a man in a man's world. Every one of the 2,068 entries in the Dark Knight litany of judgmental darts, drawn clean of sting, her hypocrisy exposed. To reveal it, to defend myself with just a twist of her own language, could have removed her from my life forever. When I could take no more, I exploded, but I did not attack on this point of exposed weakness. I did not behave well. I threw a tantrum. I raged about our history, raising old grievances to throw her way. I let her true pain lie where it was, though, settled for a revisitation of my own, striving for kindness, even in my cruelty. It was difficult, but I remembered the guy who interviewed me for autism saying, "Have you ever sacrificed a relationship rather than lose an argument?" And I thought in that moment of friends alienated over the years, job interviews blown, pitches destroyed in the room by my insistence that I knew my script better than the guy who had read the coverage and had ideas for changes. Now, on my 60th birthday, one of my few remaining family gurgling her last in the room with me, I did not need to destroy this relationship, even if it meant losing an argument. Later, my sister brought me a chocolate mousse cake that I could not eat because she brought it to me through the hospital corridors without any wrapping, so I feared it even though it was a peace offering. I didn't tell her that I had chosen not to break her spirit, not to wield against her the magnificent weapon she had fashioned for me. On the way to my rental car, I tossed the birthday pastry and texted her a quick thank you. The next day, I apologized for yelling at her. She's trying as hard as the rest of us, making difficult choices, trying to be decent, trying to reach out. And now that I know what it is that makes me such a dick, I have no excuse not to make the necessary adjustments. Thank you.